Welcome everybody and happy Arbor Day.
Happy Arbor Day.
Welcome to our second session of our National Arbor Day Webinar Conference hosted by Rice Creek Field Station and the Canal Forest Restoration Project at SUNY Oswego. My name is Kristen Haynes. I'm the Assistant Director of Rice Creek Field Station and a project member of the Canal Forest Restoration Project. So I'm very pleased to welcome today Cooper Uliano, and Cooper has volunteered with our project in the past. And I gotta bring up my notes. So Cooper is a senior and soon to be graduate of the University at Buffalo in New York State. He's majoring in graphic design and he spends most of his time outdoors, hiking, camping, snowboarding, and rock climbing with his girlfriend, Piper. He is a photographer located in Watertown, New York, with an emphasis on landscape, wildlife, and environmental photography. Much of his photography is centered around the Adirondacks, as well as throughout the eastern United States. Cooper's topic today is Inaudible, Invisible, the Hidden Language of Trees. So we're very excited to have an artistic perspective to add to our lineup today. I just want to mention to everybody, we will have a live Q&A with Cooper at the end of this session. So as we go along, if any questions come up, feel free to submit those via the live chat box. And then I will pass any of your questions on to Cooper at the end. So with that, I will turn it over to Cooper.
Awesome, thank you so much. Yeah, so as Kristen said, I'm Cooper and I'm a photographer located in the eastern United States. And the project I'll be talking to you about today is Inaudible, Invisible, the Hidden Language of Trees. So let me just share my screen real quick. And we'll hop on. There we go. There we go. All right. Oops. Sorry about that. Back to the beginning. All right. Yeah, so basically the birth of this project, it started originally as a senior thesis project for my photography class. And it sort of grew into something that I am planning on pursuing for quite a while. Yeah, so we'll just get right into it. So that's my bio. I think all that stuff was said already. Yeah, so this is some of my other work. I'll just give you a quick intro to sort of what I do and how I work. So this photograph is from McNaughton Mountain, and actually it was just taken recently on a trip with my girlfriend Piper. And yeah, so these are some of the landscape photography spots that I go to and places that I photograph. This was taken in Thailand on a recent trip. A really cool spider, but yeah. And this is another project that I'm currently doing, talking about Superfund sites along the eastern United States. This is a project I'll be pursuing this summer, actually. It was funded, which was pretty awesome. So I'm excited about that as well. Yeah, so the project, basically this will be the outline of the project that I'll talk about. It'll be about the birth of the project and the two main parts of the project, which consist of the audio compositions that I make and the infrared photographs that I take, and then putting them together and why I put them together. And then we'll, yeah, have some questions. So that'll be exciting. So the birth of the project, as I said, it started as a senior thesis project. And I was thinking about, how we communicate as humans, how trees communicate, and sort of how we can communicate with trees and how we can pass this sort of language barrier that we have in terms of communication. And so, I thought about how do trees communicate with each other, or how do they communicate with us, their history and their information and sort of their data, their lives. And so one of the major ways they communicate with us, or how we can understand them, is through their tree rings, as that's a way of telling us their history and their life and their locational qualities. What about their location is interesting or unique? And so I wanted to find a way, my next thought was I wanted to find a way to make visual data from these rings into audio compositions. And so I decided to put these audio compositions. So once I decided to make these into audio compositions, I decided that I also wanted to work with photography and kind of combine these two mediums to sort of get a completely different but still whole picture of the forest that we're looking at and the forest that I'm photographing and trying to understand. And I chose to work with infrared photography because of some of the really interesting qualities that it has that we'll talk about later in the talk. So the audio compositions. This was probably the most difficult and also the most interesting part for me. There's really 5 major steps that I went through to design these audio compositions, which I'll go into. But really, what I'm trying to do is give a unique and descriptive history of the rings and the data that's in those rings. There's a lot of information stored in these rings. I mean, you can get details about fires, droughts, floods, warm or cold periods, obviously the ages of the trees, the length of their growth periods, and a lot of other really interesting and important pieces of data that a lot of scientists use all the time, but it's something I wanted to use in a more artistic realm. So basically, I wanted to take this data and make sounds with it. That was the premise of the project for this part. So I did it in 5 major steps, and I call it 5 major steps of transcription. So the first thing I do is I photograph these tree rings, and I photograph them with a well-lit image and a clean cut of the tree, so I can get a really high contrast and well-lit photograph of these rings. That's pretty necessary for the project. And so and this also means that oftentimes, actually pretty much every time so far, that the trees are already cut down. So this is also a sort of memorialization of the tree and the rings and the information that it has, and before it sort of decays and goes away. So it's sort of in that way a way to hold on to this information before it's lost. So the first step is the photographing of the tree rings, and the second step is I bring that into Photoshop and I increase the contrast and the saturation to have a more dynamic range for the image. So I want the data to really shine in the image. So I want the lights, the darks, the weird banding, the larger ring sizes. All of that stuff is really important and important information. It's sort of the focal point of the project is getting that information. So after that second step, I go to the third step, which is I bring that image into a program called processing. Now, processing is a really interesting and powerful program. I could go on for hours about it, but basically it's a coding language mainly used for artists that allows for the interaction of different disciplines. And what I mean by that is, you could make almost anything with this program. You could code basic motion graphics, a ball moving across a screen, or you could do a lot more than that, but you could, in my case, convert images into sound data. All you need to do is basically write some basic code and have a little bit of knowledge, as well as there's tons of resources online for it. So it's a real community with that program. And so my procedure was I used the code that I had written, and some of which I used from the internet. So like I said, that community aspect, which is great. And I used that code, and it takes the hue, saturation, and contrast of the images and assigns them what is called a pure tone frequency to every single color and tone within the image. And so pure tone frequencies are basically the purest form of tones. There's not really any inflection of sound or room ambience or reverberations or anything else that generally would make the sound more pleasurable. It's sort of just this pure data in terms of sound. There's nothing that affects it. It's really just clean cut and dry, sort of factual and analytical type of sound. And that's also part of the project. I really wanted to keep this as sort of factual and data driven as possible, while still interpreting the data in sort of my own personal artistic way. So yeah, basically how this works is colors are assigned these pure tone frequencies. So for example, maybe a dark red color is assigned a low humming frequency, whereas a light tan color might produce a higher pitch frequency. So each one's got their own sound. And I basically input the photo into the program. I run the process from the code that I wrote, and it scans the images for the colors and tones and makes them into frequencies. And the most amazing part is I have this thing I call a tone selector, and the tone selector I can drag and move around the image, and I can basically pick and choose the rings that I find most interesting, or I can, with pretty great accuracy, go around these rings and follow the exact data. So there's really no loss of data or confusion about what rings I was using. I'm following the rings that the tree gives me, which is really an integral part of what I wanted to do. And so I manually drag that tone selector, and then I get actual sound data from the actual tree rings. And so that was the first part of that was the most major part of this part of the project. And then I record that composition, generally with an external microphone that I plug into my computer, and then it inputs it into that, and that gets recorded. So I try to work with as high fidelity sound as I can, because I think that's also important. And then the final step is sort of, I would call the most interpretive part of this, of the audio composition, and I bring it into GarageBand. So pure tone frequencies are pretty harsh to listen to. You could probably look them up on YouTube or something, but they're pretty sharp, pretty harsh sounds, and they're quite painful to the ears if you listen to them at higher volumes. So what I want to do is I just want to make the sounds a little bit more pleasurable to listen to, and without deleting or masking any of the data that I captured. I want that to shine through, but I don't want people to be in pain when they're listening to my artwork. So so what I do is I bring it into GarageBand. I put on some basic editing techniques, and what I get is the final product. And I apply the same technique to every single audio composition. So there's no confusion about, oh, what did he do to this sound that he didn't do to this sound? Every sound is treated exactly the same through the same process. And so my goal in that is just to be able to generate the exact same system that will produce each work. So there's no confusion about how I transcribe the work. Yeah, and so that's basically the general idea of this first part of the audio composition. And I just have listed a few of the programs I used. And yeah, so my favorite part, I think, personally, was figuring out how to make these images into sound. That was really interesting and a really difficult task for me to do. It took me a few weeks to really figure it out, but there's plenty of ways to do this. There's also spectrographs. There's other ways to scan the image, but this for me felt like the most effective way. So yeah, so that was really interesting. And as well as taking the photos of the rings, because I got to be outdoors, and it was really interesting on a side note. Normally I'm looking at trees and I'm looking up at trees and their leaves, or, the sky or whatever. And this time I was looking for dead cut down trees. So it was really interesting to be walking around in the forest and it's like, oh, look at that cut down tree. That's perfect. So it's a little bit of a perspective change. That was really weird, but I enjoyed that process as well. Yeah, so the second part is the photography compositions. So as I said before, it revolves around infrared photography. Now, infrared photography is it's a really interesting form of photography and capturing light, because it captures light invisible to humans. So it's not on the visible light spectrum. And so the way I do this is I have a camera and I put a filter, or you can also convert your camera. I could get into that, but I use a filter, which is an infrared filter. So it basically deletes or blocks all the visible light coming through and hitting the camera's sensor. And it instead only allows the infrared light to come through. So I'm only capturing the light which is reflected by objects, that is the infrared light. And the reason this is so interesting and important specifically to trees is because any plant or tree, any sort of living organism that produces chlorophyll reflects mainly green and infrared, shortwave infrared light. And so what I can get from these images that I take in infrared, in the infrared style, is these beautifully glowing and sort of glowing and sort of ephemeral images of these trees that also gives us some real analytical information about their health. So when these trees are glowing, you can know that they're actually absorbing the lights that they want to absorb, and they're reflecting the light that they don't. And so it's a corollary effect of understanding what they absorb and what they're reflecting. And so it gives us a good general view of what's happening with these trees. Yeah, and so that was basically the second part. And so what I was looking for in those images was mainly trees that I thought would stand out in a forest, or trees that I thought had a specific emphasis in that forest, or a role in that forest. And also, during this time, like this time period, as I've been working on this project for a few months, there's not a lot of leaves out yet. So a lot of the trees I'm taking are either evergreen trees, or they're trees that somehow held their leaves, or there's so a lot of the forest is leafless right now. So I get some really interesting contrast and these sort of like darks and lights in the forest, where generally if you were to do this in the summer, it would be an overwhelming swash of light. It would be pretty explosive in how bright it is. But for me right now, I'm trying to pick out sort of single moments of light in overall darker settings. Yeah, and so putting these two parts together, the point of putting them together was really to explore, as I said earlier, explore the forest and explore what we're looking at from a completely different perspective. So by hearing kind of what they have to say, what their data is saying, and then seeing, I guess, in a way, their vitals through the photographs, we're getting a completely different perspective of these trees and the forests and what they want to communicate to us. And that's sort of, I'd say, the overall goal of the project. As well as on a more semantic level, it's also serving as a historical representation of this specific tree's life and what it specifically has to tell us. And so, yeah, and so I guess at this point, I'll get into showing you a few of the works. So yeah, so this is the first one. It was taken in Irondequoit Bay, and I'll play a minute-long clip for you of the sound. So the ring was taken in the same location. It's not of this tree, obviously. That one's still doing great, but it's taken in the same area as that, and so that's sort of the point. So I'll play that for you.
Cooper, I don't think the sound is coming through for us.
Oh no? Okay. Let me fix that real quick.
Okay.
Let's see. Share computer sound. Oh, I'm sorry. I checked that before I got on, but it seems to have missed it. Okay, let's try that again. I think that should work fine now.
Okay,
Thanks. Cool. Thanks for that. So, is that working? Awesome. so that was one of the earlier sound works that I produced, and it was pretty weird and pretty creepy at first. Like, what it was really interesting to see what they were generating for me with little interpretation and sort of personalization of the sound. So it was pretty mind-blowing to me to have been able to produce something like that, and it's kind of terrifying in a way, but it's really interesting. And yeah, it kind of blew my mind when it first came out. I was like, wow, that's way weirder than I would have ever expected. So this is the second image, and I'll play a little bit of the sound for you. This was taken at a place nearby my home in Watertown called Chameau Barrens, and that's a really beautiful and geologically really interesting place. And it had some really nice photos that I was able to capture. So I'll play that one for you too. And this as well was a tree that was, not this tree, the picture, but a tree that was cut down that I got the sound from in the same area. So. Yeah, so just a quick explanation. So a lot of those beeps and blips that you're hearing are pieces of visual contrast and color data. So a lot of those higher pitched noises are lighter tones, and a lot of the lower tones are darker, or a lot of the lower tones are darker colors or tones. And there's, in every one of these, which was also interesting, there's this sort of generative undertone that flows through the whole. It's this sort of like medium hum, and that's sort of the base color of the ring. So every tree, I try to keep this sort of I'd say 50% gray color, the middle gray tone, which would be sort of like a medium tan in the tree ring. I tried to keep that at the original tone it was, and only bring out the highlights and the darks a little more to get more data. So that sort of under hum is, I would call it like the baseline life of each of these trees. That's sort of how I look at it. I'm sure it could be interpreted other ways, but so that was another small piece to this puzzle. Yeah, and so I'll play, this was one of my, so this picture of the Tree of Light, this was also taken in Chameau Barrens. And this is one of my favorite sound pieces. So I'll play the whole thing through on this one, and then I guess we can get to some questions. Yeah. yeah, so that was one of the more recent ones that I've made. And I guess just one quick comment I'll make on it before we get to questions. I think each of the parts of this project, I would say is interesting on its own, but something that I found amazing, and it sort of kind of happened just by luck, but putting them together, I think really changes the meaning of the photograph and the sound. I've looked at these photographs without the sound, obviously, about 1,000 times, and I've listened to those sounds without the photographs in front of them plenty of times as well. And each of them on their own is fine, but I think what really clicked for me was actually getting that whole view of the forest in that way, and it completely changes for me the how these sounds influence the image and how the image influenced the sound. So I guess with that, yeah, we could get to some questions.
All right, thank you so much, Cooper.
Yeah.
Let me see. Can I have you, can you stop sharing your screen?
Yep.
And then you could reshare if a question comes up that you have to refer to.
Sure.
Okay, so at this point, we would encourage anyone watching who has a question about Cooper's project. There should be a live chat box on the YouTube channel, so you could submit your questions there, or you can submit them as a comment and I'll pull them up. But I'll start with just a couple questions I have.
Sure.
from listening to that. So very interesting combination of work.
Thank you.
Do you have, do you ever produce like a musical score or anything like that from the sounds?
You mean like a combination of different tree ring sounds, or?
I guess my question is, do you ever have a visual output of the music? Either,
Oh,
I don't know how that would look like.
well, so I have actually thought about that a few times. At first, I didn't think it was possible to I mean, it's possible to get the pure tone frequency score,
Mhm.
but I don't know how easy it would be for after the edit. But one of the amazing things about that processing program is it actually also outputs to me the raw informational data in another panel. So it tells me exactly what tone is being used for every single color in that spectrum of colors on that image. And when I record it the way I do with the tone selector, it produces for me the exact lineage of tones that I used when I recorded that piece. So that's something really interesting that I've thought about working with a little bit, if not more for just a reference almost of how these things are produced. But yeah, I'd like to see how it would look after the at the end interpretation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking too, I'm not a sound expert, so I don't know the terminology, but one of those like audiograms or an audio, I don't know, maybe you know the word for this, but where it shows like the pitches
Yeah, yeah, I
or
know
all the sound frequencies together.
Yep.
It just seems like it would look really interesting for some of those intricate sounds we're hearing.
Yeah, I'm sure that would look pretty wild. I have tried putting it into a spectrograph, which is I don't really understand it fully myself, but it's a really interesting. I think it basically represents the volume and tonality of every sound coming through, and it shows it on a color spectrum, basically a sort of horizontal color spectrum. And some of the inputs that I've put into that from these tree ring compositions have been pretty ridiculous looking, like pretty awesome. So yeah, that's another thing I've been trying to discover a little bit. I'm sort of just on the precipice of learning everything there is to learn about this project. And that's another interesting thing is it's always evolving, this project, even from the first sound that I made composition to the most recent one. I've been able to get a lot more of those pops and clicks and beeps just from how I'm transcribing. I'm not changing it in any way. I'm just getting better at it. And so that's been a really cool and exciting thing for me, definitely.
Awesome. let's see. So you mentioned that a lot of times you're tracing the tree rings. I'm guessing that means in circles. Have you tried at
Yes.
all like cross cuts through the rings, or to see how different traces that you make translate into different sounds?
Yeah, definitely. I've experimented a lot with that. Some of the sounds that I didn't show you, some of the ones I've produced do have cross cuts as well as reversals and other elements, even like the edge of the bark. If I can get that, sometimes that's a really interesting texture to work with in terms of tones, and uh, it you can actually feel, or I guess hear, the difference in the quality of the sounds. Um, a lot of times the edges are crosscuts because obviously every ring has a light and dark based on its growth period and stuff. And so if you go through a crosscut, you get this like cacophony of sound,
Mm.
all these highs and lows and
Mhm.
intrusions of sound, and it's a really amazing experience to hear that as well. And so I've done some of that. I want to find a way to fit that into the project as well, because I think that would be interesting. Maybe like a sort of a greatest hits of tree ring, best moments of the year for that guy. So yeah, that's also something I've been looking into.
Very interesting. So we do have a couple questions that came in. Let's
Awesome.
see. Um, so someone asks, how has this perspective changed, or sorry, how has this project changed your perspective on the forest? Do you have any future plans moving forward with this? So I guess that's two questions.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, perfect. So to answer the first part, I would say on a sort of immediate level, um, it changed how I look at trees in terms of the dead ones and the alive ones. No longer was I focusing on the beauty of a big old oak tree, but I was looking at that stump next to it, and that for me was the most immediate perspective change and probably the most powerful one. And also, with the photographs, it really opened my eyes to what we don't see and how much of the world we're not seeing. uh, you know, I I was seeing trees in a completely new light, literally and figuratively. And a lot of times, the most mundane scenes in a normal photograph were some of the most beautiful ones in an infrared photograph. And also, I was looking for conditions for the photos that were completely different than normal. So for a normal photograph, obviously this is just an opinion, or kind of sometimes you do this, but you're looking for overcast days or days that have a more ambient light instead of that harsh line or shadow. But with infrared photographs, you want the brightest, clearest day possible because the sky reflects little to no infrared light, but clouds do reflect some. So if you have a nice clear day, you get this like rich black sky, which is really kind of confusing and disorienting to the visual understanding of how a day works. And so that was another thing that probably most blew my mind about how infrared photography works, and sort of one of the larger perspective changes. And then what was the second part again? Oh, I can't.
Oops.
Oh.
The second part was, do you have any future plans moving forward with this project?
Yeah, I think um, I would say the most immediate thing I want to do is probably continue to catalog and categorize these sort of pockets of forest. And I really want to, on a larger scale, something I'm hopeful of is capturing these essences of every major forest type or forest area in the northeastern United States. So I really want to do this in some alpine environments if I could. Obviously, I don't know how many alpine trees have been sawed down with perfect rings, but maybe if it's fallen down and dead, I could, saw that off and take a photograph or something. So I think there's such a diverse range of sounds that it could produce and images as well. I really want to just take it all over and just do this process to so many different places. Yeah, and yeah, I would say that's probably where I want to go mainly with the project.
Kind of following up on that. So for anyone interested in the project, you said this is initially, right now, this is part of your senior thesis. Do you anticipate, publishing this or making it available anywhere online so that anyone interested could view more of your work?
Yeah, I currently put up just the photographs on my website, but I'm planning on doing a sort of a blog post portfolio showing sort of segment about it, because um, I really want to get this process known and understood, and seen, because I think it's really interesting, and I think a lot of other people will think it's interesting. So yeah, currently the images are on my website.
And probably, once we're able to edit this video and add in a description, we can put a link into Cooper's website so
Yeah,
that
sounds great.
people interested could go check out more of the work.
Awesome. Yeah.
Let's see. One of my questions is, do you have a count for how many species of trees you've photographed or done this tree ring work with?
I'm still editing a few of the photographs, but to count, I would say I think I have 15 or 16 edited photographs, and there's probably 8 different species of trees total I photographed, maybe 9. And I have I'm working. It's a little bit longer of a process to get the sounds done. So I have 8 or 9, and I think maybe 6 of them are different so far. So and that's the other thing, is I think a lot of the trees that are cut down are chosen from the same sort of stock or species of tree, especially the ones that were like sawed down and like chosen to be sawed down. So that's something that is a bit of a limit to the project, is how far I can go with.
We may have lost Cooper's feed there very briefly. Let's see if he comes back. Well, I've still lost Cooper, unfortunately. So it looks like we'll have to wrap up the session. If people have ongoing questions for Cooper, you can submit a comment and we'll make sure that those get passed along to him. You could also, oh, okay, we have Cooper back.
That was weird. I don't know what happened there, but yeah, we're back in action.
Okay, great. Okay, so I don't see any other user submitted questions. Were there any, final thoughts or anything else that you wanted to share with everybody, Cooper?
Yeah, I would say, in such a trying time right now, maybe get out and find some forests that no one else is looking at, and just enjoy yourself,
Well, we may have lost Cooper again, but that was a nice sentiment to end on, I think. So I want to thank everybody who tuned into this session. We'll be back at 11 o'clock with Wendy Perrone, who's going to be presenting on trees and forest therapy, and how trees can get us through difficult times. And then later on in the day, we'll kind of switch over into forest restoration projects, and some research talks and some practical advice.
Oh.
So,
Sorry.
Cooper signed on again. I was just kind of closing us off. I want to thank Cooper very much for joining us and sharing with us his interesting project. And I just want to wish everybody a happy Arbor Day, and thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun. Thanks.